Welcome to What is Black Podcast, the podcast where we have conversations about issues important to raising healthy and thriving Black children and adolescents. I'm your host, Dr. Jacqueline Douge. I'm a pediatrician and mom of two. And on today's episode, we have part 2 of Reflections on Fatherhood. This is a follow-up from the Father's Day episode. Today, we get into a deeper conversation with our special guest, my husband, Max Douge, my brother-in-law, Pierre Douge, and family friend, Wayne Abbott. So they each have wonderful and great kids and have a lot to say about fatherhood. So I hope you enjoy the conversation, and let's get on with today's episode.
My name is Wayne Abbott. I grew up in central New Jersey. And, I had the good fortune of having some fantastic parents that absolutely were role models for me in terms of how I try and approach being a father today. I'm speaking specifically about my dad. He grew up in St. Thomas, large family, and navigated, doing his thing there in St. Thomas, the foundation of him becoming a community servant and very involved in the community, as well as the beginnings of him becoming a fantastic engineer. All those foundations were based upon that family situation that he had in St. Thomas. He came up to the States shortly thereafter and then ultimately graduated from City College with an electrical engineering degree, and then subsequently ended up working for RCA and then through its iterations of GE and then SRI International for 45 years. And then on top of that, for 40 years, he was the chairman of the board at a local daycare center, as well as participating in a number of other community activities. So having that as the backdrop in terms of fatherhood, I had a lifelong example of somebody who, not only was very focused on providing me everything that I needed to grow up, not only just intellectually, but, support-wise in any of the endeavors that I was involved in. But I got to see firsthand all the efforts that he did in trying to improve the community, whether it was mentoring kids, whether it was writing all the code for all the applications that the daycare center used to manage their affairs, from attendance to accounting to you name it. They were one of the best well-run nonprofits, in the state as a result. And then all the efforts that he did over the years of his career, whether it be involved in, satellite technologies, involved, little known fact, my dad was part of the team that brought the high-definition television specs to bear. So I had all those things as backdrops as I went into fatherhood myself. So I'll leave it at there, Jackie. I'll let the others go in, and then I'll kind of touch on other pieces of, what fatherhood means to me. But I'll defer the mic to the others.
Okay, thank you, Wayne, for sharing that information. So we'll go with Pierre, and then we'll end with Max.
Okay, so my name is Pierre Douge. Jackie is my sister-in-law, Max is my brother, and same thing. I grew up also in Piscataway, New Jersey. Had a very good childhood. Look back on it with a lot of fondness. We grew up in a tight-knit family. We're first-generation Americans, with our dad and our mom emigrating from Haiti. We are a family that we are tight-knit and close, and we also are large. We grew up with my dad, his brother living down the street, who was married to my mom's twin sister. And my dad was not only our father, but also the everybody's dad. Some of my fondest memories are not only listening to my dad give us stories and telling us different things from Haiti, but having a lot of friends and cousins and nieces and nephews and even aunts and uncles all basically sitting around listening to my dad wax philosophical about a multitude of different things. He was a very diligent, hardworking guy. That was probably the biggest lesson that he always imparted on me, was just the importance of work ethic and persistence in getting things done, and just having a plan and having a true commitment to seeing stuff through. He was in finance for American Standard for over 30 years. I don't remember the exact number of years, but he even taught us many lessons, just sort of telling us the day-to-day work routines that he had, and some of the steps that he had to navigate through to succeed and flourish there. And so, I've tried to take all those things to heart over time. As far as being a dad, I've always tried to follow his model, and in terms of, trying to set a high bar. That was always the thing that I always understood, was we had certain standards to live up to. And those are the things that I try to impart upon my kids, is try to, create standards for yourself that, are beyond what is the quote unquote normal. Your standards are for yourself, and those are standards that you have to meet. And they don't really bear on what other people are doing. They bear on the standards that, you have for yourself, as well as what we have established in the family, whether it comes to academics, whether it comes to the way that you carry yourself when you walk into a room, or just anything that you do. So definitely have a lot of fond memories. His influence is very great in terms of how I interact with my kids and my nieces and nephews. And I guess that's about it for now. I'll cede the rest to Max, and he can fill in whatever gaps I've left out.
All right, I guess I'll jump in. My name is Max Douge. As Pierre mentioned, we're brothers. The host of this show is my better half. As far as fatherhood goes, both Pierre and Wayne didn't leave a lot for me to say, but the one thing that really jumps to mind that my father imparted on me and on all of us is a focus on values. It's something I've always kept very close to. He always talked very fondly about having family around. It was always something that was very important to him. And even though he's no longer with us, that value is held extremely strong through all of us, and even now into the younger generations through our kids. We can see how much they value and appreciate family, and their willingness to be with each other, I think, stems from what my father, in conjunction with my mother, have imparted on all of us. Hard work, the ethic, the values, those are all things that, similar to Pierre, is just funneled down through all of us. Listening to Wayne share about his father, it's actually more amazing to hear how much our fathers kind of mirrored each other in terms of establishing, some true values for themselves: hard work, family, community. My father was a soccer player as a kid and became an integral part of the community through coaching kids that I grew up with and Pierre grew up with. So it was a real treat to see and learn all the different facets that made up who he was. And, we just kind of absorbed all of that as we were growing up, and now trying to impart that on our kids.
So, Wayne, I want to go back to a question that you sort of teased with your introduction, a question about what it means to be a father. So when do you all really feel like you assume that title, or are you still working through it, or what does it mean for you to be a father?
Yeah, well, it's a lifelong pursuit, right? Once you become a father, you're always learning, and I think any good father is always trying to figure out what they can do better, to impart that wisdom and knowledge and guidance, to their kids. So I think that's something that people should always be thinking about. Your job, really doesn't end until you're basically off of this planet and on to the next realm. So, in terms of, fatherhood, means to me, at the end of the day, all I am really trying to do is make sure that my kids have the best foundation so that they can be their best selves, and be able to do that, without necessarily having to have, my day-to-day guidance. You really want to be able to have your kids have the opportunity so they can leave their mark on the world. And that's the goal that I try and do. Jokingly, I probably haven't reached that point yet, because I think we all will say that as our kids go through their, especially their teenage years, of course, we don't know anything at that point. But you just try and leave as many of those little breadcrumbs along the way so that when they get to a level of maturity and they can really understand and internalize the things that you've been trying to tell them since they were little kids, you hope that they'll take that to heart and use that information and guidance, to their benefit. And hopefully they will be able to just make whatever environment they go into all the much better because of that presence that they bring to the table. So, ultimately that's all I'm trying to do. If they can be a net positive on the world, and they can live a happy life, then hopefully that will, make me a happy man when when I'm done.
How do you all navigate, the fact that, mom and dad perspectives, and at the same time trying to impart, your wisdom to your kids?
I have to say it's a work in progress. Right now our boys are a lot older, and the as Wayne noted, the parenting never ends really. But early in the years, we had different perspectives on how to address whether it was bad behavior, academic performance, their interests. We each had our own perspectives. We each had our own thoughts on what was good, bad, appropriate, or inappropriate. And more than anything else, it's a learning process. We had to talk through, what we felt was appropriate or inappropriate. We had to talk through how we would address certain issues, and we still do. But it's a learning process the whole time. I don't ever recall an instance where, we felt like, okay, we're good, let's ride this out. It's an ongoing endeavor. And even now, both of our guys are in their early adulthood stages, and as such, they have a whole new set of issues that they're now learning about and having to address. And so our approach, yet again, is changing and adapting to what their needs are. However, I think at this stage, as parents, I think we're more so on the same page than we were 10, 15 years ago. 10, 15 years ago, again, we were just kind of feeling our way through and trying to adapt and understand the other person's perspective. There were times Jackie addressed things and I, scratched my head, but in hindsight, I realized she was correct, and I'm sure she probably scratched her head at some of the things I did, but it's an overall process. Again, I think we're going to continually be learning. I don't think it should be that you stop all of a sudden. I often hear the case, I can't wait till my kids turn 18, I'm done. I never understood that concept. My father passed away only a few years ago, and, if he were here today, I'm 50 plus, he would still be, shedding light on what he thinks, I'm doing right, wrong, or can do differently. So the whole concept that, they turn 18 and you're done, to me is foreign. And I wish people wouldn't take that approach, but to each his own. But I look at my guys as early adults. They're coming into a whole new set of issues that they're going to still need assistance just navigating. I mean, as adults, they're going to make their own decisions, but they're still going to look for some guidance. I recall as an adult, I still turn to my father for feedback, input, or just to bounce an idea off every once in a while. So, but it's an ongoing process. Jackie will keep me on the straight and narrow.
Yeah, I think what Max said is, and I feel comfortable that Wayne probably thinks also the same way. Is that our fathers never stopped being our fathers. Like there was a transition as we got older, for sure. I certainly went through some ups and downs, and there was a transition where the relationship evolves, and your father starts to become maybe more of a confidant, more of a friend versus somebody, but it still serves as your guide through life, through parenting, so yeah, that's definitely something that I think we all share in common. And I agree with Max. Like I don't really understand or haven't put any stock in the concept of when the kids turn 18 or when they graduate from school, then basically my job is done, or whatever the case might be. I think with us, I have younger kids than Wayne and Max. My two neither of my two have reached teenage status yet. Although maybe not in their minds, but they haven't reached it yet. And I think that, it's a constant process of reevaluation. And sort of, sometimes, I'll defer and other times I will sort of take the lead, on different things having to do with the kids. I think what I've learned over time, my window of experience is much narrower than the two of you guys, but what I've learned over time is that, my fingerprints will be all over everything, regardless of how much conscious or unconscious effort I put into it, my fingerprints will be on. So if I don't do enough of something, those fingerprints will show themselves too. If I do too much or too little, the fingerprints will show. So what I've tried to realize is, just to stay involved in all capacities, and then just try to learn the balance between when to defer to my wife, Patricia, or when to defer sometimes to, particularly for the older child, Gabby, when to defer to her and let her feel her own way through it versus saying, no, this is the way you should do it, or basically do it my way or whatever. So yeah, it's a constantly evolving process that you constantly reevaluate your approach in how much influence you do or do not want to have.
How have you found being a father influencing how you raise your kids, over time, and also having different genders?
Yeah, it's definitely been it's a challenge. Now is probably a greater challenge when it comes to the girls. The girl, I should say, Gabby, because it's just she's at a stage of her life. She's entering middle school where, I have a much narrower frame of reference because, obviously I didn't go through some of the things that she's going through. So, and now in general, society and just life in general for this current generation is so much more open, and the kids have so much more exposure to so many different things that we didn't necessarily have exposure to at the same age of middle school. And so it's definitely a tricky process. And I certainly defer to her mother in terms of, the familiarity and understanding of some of the experiences that she's starting to go through as she enters puberty. And then, the other thing that I try to do is I try to take into account that, as a young lady growing into being a young woman, like her first real experience dealing with the opposite sex is going to be me and her brother. And I mean, her brother's a little different because he's much younger, but I try to factor that into how I interact with her and, how I impart some of my thought processes and decision making on her. So it's definitely, I would not have been able to appreciate the difference until going through the experience, for sure. The young lady, and especially a young lady that, as I said, is at a stage of a pretty, significant stage of development and change, is definitely brings a lot of challenges that are very different. And also, different kids have different personalities anyway. And so, with my son, I have a little bit more of a familiarity with what I'm trying to do based on my interactions with my dad, based on my interactions with Max and watching Max with his sons. So I have a much more defined template of how and what I want to do with him in terms of guiding him and influencing him and helping him to become the person I hope he becomes. And with my daughter, I try to use the same core principles in terms of personality, but there has to be an accounting for the fact that she's a young lady, and there is a difference in terms of experiences and approaches and the way that she sees the world and the way that the world sees her. So it's very challenging, but it's something that I think in that scenario, I think that's where your partnership comes in with your significant other, because you lean on their experiences and hopefully they lean on my experiences when it comes to my son.
Wayne, I don't know if you have any different thoughts. I know, your kids are older now, but how have you found navigating parenting your different children?
Yeah, well, I think one thing that I've seen, whether it be with, your kids, Pierre's kids, mine, anybody else's I've seen, I'm always amazed that these kids come from the same, stock or what have you, but they still come out very, very different. And you would notice this from a very young age, that their personalities, even though they're around each other all the time and they're in the same environment, they developed very distinct ways about how they, navigate and perceive and walk through the world. So, I guess my approach has always been is just to try and tailor how I, impart guidance or wisdom to them and meet them wherever they're at. I try and do little things, whether it be just by example or just trying to find those quiet moments, or, when a situation arises, try to make those little points about, did you see this, or do you understand why this person reacted this way, or do you see how you could have thought 2 steps ahead to work through something? I try and just do that. But to Pierre's point, obviously, the girls are very different. They got different, interesting ways about them as they enter their puberty, for sure. But, again, all you can do is be who you are, and who you hopefully can provide, whatever, guidance and a bellwether for how you hope they can exist in this world, how they can interact with the opposite sex. Just try and make sure that they understand what things should be important. Hopefully they can, you can help them work through the things that they're interested in and help them do those simple pros and cons lists, whether it be emotionally or just logically, on how they go about making decisions about what they're going to do, who they're going to interact with, and where they ultimately want to be in life. So that's how I try and approach things. The only other thing I'll say with regard to that, which I will do with both of them, quite a bit of the parenting philosophy that I've tried to adopt, whether it's also from the influence of my parents, but I still do remember an incident that I talk about quite a bit from when I was a little kid, actually. And my friend who was 2 doors down from me from where I grew up, his father was teaching his little sister how to ride. And there's this big open area where we all used to play next to my house. And there's a big curve around it. So she was learning how to ride the bike, had the training wheels, and she's flying down the straightaway. And then she's not figuring out that she needs to brake as she goes around the curve. And she fell like 9-10 times. And I remember just watching him wince every time she did it. But he let her fall. And he went over there, cleaned her up, picked her back up, but then he got her right back on that bike until a couple hours later, she's actually riding the bike pretty well. And that incident always stuck with me, and I've tried to use that with my kids. And that's actually probably, if there's a big difference between the way my wife and I kind of approach things, she's, a little bit more on the side of, hey, let me try and stop them from falling. And I'm more of I'll wince and let them fall, and I'll try and help them get back up and figure, let's talk about what you did wrong. Let's figure out another way that you can do things right, and then hopefully I can help you execute. And I think that, you need a little bit of both of that, right? Because you don't want to go through life always, sticking your hand in the fire to figure out that it's hot. You want to have the impartial wisdom to say, you know what, that fire is hot. Let me tell you how to avoid it. So I think that's what we've been able to do, at least from the both of us, to give the kids that spectrum of guidance. And, we have to tailor it again for, our daughter or our son, but that's generally how we've tried to go through things.
So it sounds like, for both of you, it really didn't matter. There's some things that are different, gender-wise, but it sounds as though the philosophy that you have for your kids is the same no matter what gender, what age, right? You're just trying to, provide them the guidance that they need at that time, which I think is important. I think because, stereotypically, I think we think of, dads having a particular role and maybe being a little bit hands-off with girls and, having perceptions of what, the mom's role is with their son or with their daughter. So I think it's nice that you all kind of, break up that stereotype. And that's what I admire about you, right? I think your kids are your kids first, whether or not they're girls or boys. And it depends on the, whatever gender they are. Because I know that there's some parents who have children that identify as, gender fluid. But I think, you take your kids as individuals first and foremost and provide them the guidance that they need at that time, which I think is great.
Yeah, I think what Wayne said is that's, for me, is something that's still definitely a work in progress. Because when my daughter was younger, I was all about the fall down. It's like, don't cry, get up. I was all about that. And then, my wife is very much I want to stop her from falling down. I want to protect her. And, and so it's hard because you do want to protect her, obviously. But, I feel as though all of the women that I know, including my wife, including you, Jackie, there's a requisite, and Pascal as well for that matter, there's a requisite toughness and a requisite resilience and defiance almost to that leads their path, that has led to their pathways to being successful. And so I feel like that doesn't develop by somebody coddling you. And I feel like, like you said, stereotypically over history, it's like, it's always, I don't want my daughter to fall into those roles. I want her to be someone that stands up on her own 2 feet, no matter the circumstance. So it's a tough balance with wanting to be protective, but then also wanting to say, no, pick yourself up and dust yourself off. And then sometimes saying, okay, well, I'm going to be the one to dust you off. But I try to do as much of the letting her fall as I can, so that at minimum she understands that part of the process. So yeah, it's interesting because it's definitely a challenge to keep the right balance between the two.
This question for each of you is, what has been your greatest joy being a father?
I guess I'll jump in. Well, I don't know if it's kind of hard to pin it down to one thing, but I think if I were to pin it down to one thing, as best I can, I would probably say I find it fascinating to see, similar to what Wayne touched on earlier, and that is that, even though we have two kids who grew up in the same household, same parents, same grandparents, uncles, et cetera, they're two very different individuals. And I think the thing that makes me proud is that they each are their own individual, and they are each very comfortable with who they are. There isn't a pretense on their part to be something that they're not. There isn't, they don't seem pressured to cave in to be something other than who they are. And I'm always impressed with that from them. One is in college right now, pursuing his interest in psychology. And I remember when he was in high school, people would often ask him, well, what are you going to do with that? And I used to anticipate that would influence his decision to either stick with it or change. And in hindsight, I'm really fascinated at the fact that, none of that ever seemed to affect him. He kind of knew early on that's what he wanted to do. And he stuck with it, and he's very relaxed and comfortable with who he is. He has his plans for what he wants to do. Sometimes Jackie and I wish he, put a little urgency in it, but he is who he is, and I admire him so much for it. And even our younger one, very different in terms of his likes and his personality, and very much the same. I just admire that he has in his mind what he wants to do, his likes, his dislikes, and he's extremely comfortable with who he is and what he wants to accomplish. I don't know if I should take credit for it, but I guess if there is something I'm particularly proud of is the fact that they're becoming their own unique individuals, and that, as they make their way into the world and have to take the world on as independent individuals, I think that's extremely important that they stay who they are, because that's of utmost importance to them. They don't have to worry about being influenced by some temporary pressure of any kind, but instead they have their views on the world, and they'll evolve as well. But as human beings, they clearly are defining themselves, and it's really a pleasure to watch them grow and continue to stick with what they feel is most important for them.
I mean, for me, I'm still a little newer in the journey, as I said, but it's just the best part of it is just the newness of every day. The sort of getting to relive experiences through their eyes. So things that are new to them that you've seen or have even forgotten about because it's just become something you're used to, or just the joy of learning something new, watching them learn something, watching them understand something new or have a new experience that they enjoy, and sometimes even that they don't enjoy, but just being there along for the ride and sort of understanding that, you're the guide here, you're the tour guide here, and the fun part of it is just watching the experiences, watching some of the innocence and the lack of inhibitions of going through something, and just taking it all in. As far as they're who they're becoming, there's still so much room to go, and yet at the same time, they still have such distinct and unique personalities that each has their own inherent things that are so much fun to deal with and so much fun to just live with. So yeah, just I guess in totality, just the day-to-day growth that takes place at this stage of their life. That there's still so much in an evolutionary stage of growing up.
Yeah, it's I would probably echo the same as Max and Pierre. I think it's hard to kind of boil things down to the greatest joy or what have you, because it's such a journey of ups and downs, across the way. So I don't know if I'd break it down to any one moment. On the preface, I would say that, the greatest joy is probably yet to come, because I think there's going to be that moment where, both of my kids finally find that passion that excites them and drives them towards excellence. That I think is going to be a fantastic moment to be a part of and witness, because it's such a beautiful blooming of a flower at that point. And then, when they really start having a sense of purpose and where they want to be in the world. So I'm still looking forward to that. My kids are 18 and 16 now at this point. So, they probably got a while before that moment happens. But it's been, a good thing to watch them over time. I would probably say it's probably the little moments where you see the building blocks of those things come into play. We just went on a family vacation, and I think for the first time, my son really was enjoying going to a museum and watching him just take pictures and really kind of study, some of the, artifacts, the statues and the paintings and so forth. I was like, wow, it's, normally, you go there and it's like a torture mission. But this time something clicked and it was different. Or with my daughter, where she's been, she's always had this really interesting creative aspect to herself, but she hasn't necessarily done a lot to, curate it, hone it, and so forth. But, you start to see little things, when she's doing her art in class this year, and her desire to want to frame some of her work, and that hasn't happened before. So, it's those little building blocks that I love watching them kind of have those moments where enough of the stars align in their head and there's a sense of accomplishment, or you can see an advancement in one aspect of their lives and stuff like that. And then to Pierre's point, just being a tour guide, but also a spectator, right? Because you just want to see how they, grow over time, and, where they start establishing, how they're going to make their impact. So that to me has been the best part of, watching them, grow over time. And, I just hope there'll be many, many more moments and we get the benefit that our parents have had, fortunately with us over time, to just be there for those moments and see those major milestones, those things that become the arc and plot points in our lives, to the point where they get to experience, us being parents. I hope to be able to do the same thing and, be a grandfather and watch them go through the process and start that cycle of life all over again themselves. So that's how I view things as far as that part is concerned.
So thank you, all of you, for sharing your reflections on fatherhood and parenting. This has been an awesome conversation. So thank you so much.
Anytime. My pleasure.
Same here. Anytime.
Thank you for listening to this episode of What is Black Podcast. We hope you enjoyed this episode. If you'd like to listen to more great episodes, please find us on any platform that you enjoy listening to podcasts. But especially if you're an Apple Podcast listener, please remember to rate and review us.